It's May and the strawberries are here. I have 14 quarts, approximately 22 pounds of strawberries, and I'm going to use 12 pounds of sugar. The goal is to end up with 5 gallons of strawberry wine. I'm going to take these berries, wash them, remove all the bad spots. Then I'm going to put them in this bucket with this wine bottle and crush them, probably about a quart at a time. Try to get them smashed well. Then dump them into the nylon mesh bag that's in my 6.5 gallon fermenter. Here's what 2 quarts looks like smashed up. I'm leaving the green stuff on them. It's not supposed to hurt the wine. It saves a whole lot of work trying to cut all them out. The bucket, the bottle, the fermenter, they were all sanitized with some sulfite solution earlier. There's 22 pounds of crushed strawberries. Now I need to take the 12 pounds of sugar and try to get that dissolved in enough water to fill that bucket up to about 5.5, maybe a little under 6 gallons. Smells really good. I got the 12 pounds of sugar dissolved in enough water to give me just under 6 gallons, about 5 3/4 gallons. Now it's time for me to add my other ingredients, which includes 2 teaspoons of acid blend, 5 teaspoons of yeast nutrient, about 2.5 teaspoons of pectic enzyme powder, and sulfites. Follow the instructions on whatever sulfites you're using. I'll mix that up in the strawberry wine must. Stir it in really well. And then I'll tie up that nylon bag on top. Then it needs to be covered loosely, allowed to breathe for at least 24 hours. Give the sulfites time to dissipate. Then we'll pitch the yeast in there sometime after 24-hour mark. Before I leave this set for the night, I need to check the gravity. And our starting gravity is approximately 1.110. That is almost 15% potential alcohol. That might be a little strong for some people. If you don't want that much alcohol, use a little less berries, a little less sugar. Of course, it all depends how much the yeast decides to eat. Well, it's been a little over 24 hours. I had this sitting here with the lid on loosely so it could breathe a little. Now it's time to pitch in the yeast. I have my yeast here. Need to stir it up. It's been rehydrating in some warm water for a few minutes. About 15 minutes for this particular yeast. And I'm going to stir that in. Stir that in really well. Cover it back up with the lid, put the airlock on it, and we'll see if we get some bubbles soon. It's been 15 hours since the yeast was added. There's some activity in the airlock. It looks like fermentation is underway. I'll take this bucket and sit it out of the way someplace for about a week to 10 days, however long it takes for the bubbles to stop. I might add that strawberry wine has a very unusual aroma when it's fermenting, so if it smells strange, don't worry too much about it. It's been 10 days now since the yeast was added. Still plenty of bubbles. Since this is a higher gravity wine, it may go a couple weeks or even longer. It's been sitting here in our spare bedroom on a piece of plastic just in case there are any leaks. The fruit in the bag inside floats to the top, so every 2 or 3 days it's a good idea to take the lid off and shove that bag of fruit back down in the liquid. You want to try to extract all the sugar and flavor and color that you can. Here's what it looks like on the inside. Very nice color. There's a few small chunks of strawberry floating around. You can see they've lost some of their color. They're getting pale. That red color is being transferred into the wine. So that's why you want to do this every couple days or however often you feel like. Just get that good and wet. And put the lid back on it and let it finish fermenting. The airlock has nearly stopped bubbling now. It's been 16 days since the yeast was put in. I'm back out here in the kitchen. I'm getting ready to rack into this 5-gallon carboy. It's been sanitized with some sulfite solution. Whenever I rack, I add 1 crushed Campton tablet. It helps maintain some level of sulfites. So I need to take a sample now in my hydrometer jar there and figure out what I've got. Then I'll attach my tubing and run it into my carboy. The champagne yeast I use has fermented to complete dryness. The gravity is about 0.990. Take our starting gravity of 1.110 and subtract 0.99, and we get a difference of 0.12. Now you multiply that times 129 to get the percentage of alcohol, and 15.48, about 15.5% alcohol by volume. That's pretty high. About a 12% would be a lot more drinkable, which you could make if you used about 18 pounds of strawberries and 10 pounds of sugar instead of the 22 pounds of strawberries and 12 pounds of sugar that I use. I have made this as a 12% alcohol wine before. It'll be good this way, but it'll have to age a while, and I'll have to sweeten it quite a bit to balance it out. It'll be more of a sipping wine than a drinking wine. Well, time to get racking. You can see the nice color in this wine. Strawberry wine makes a very interesting colored wine, not to mention the flavor. Now I used a champagne yeast. You can use any kind of good wine or champagne yeast. And you should get good results. I'll have to watch this as it fills up, make sure I don't overflow it. Then I'll put a stopper with a airlock on it. Find a nice quiet place to sit this for about a month. See what I have. Probably rack it again in a month. It takes time, but it's worth it. Now the carboy's full of bright red strawberry wine. I had almost an extra quart in the bucket. Since my initial volume in the bucket was about 5 3/4 gallons, about 5.5 gallons would be just about right. I guess somebody's going to have to drink all these extra samples. Well, check back in a month. It's been a month now since the strawberry wine was first racked. It's cleared up quite a bit. It's basically drinkable at this point, but if it was bottled right now it would end up with some sediment in the bottles. So I'm going to rack it one more time. Got a 5-gallon container down here. It's been sanitized with some sulfite solution. I have one crushed sulfite tablet I'm going to put in it. Now I have to get my siphon ready to transfer the wine. I have my racking cane and my tubing full of water so I can get a good siphon started. So what I have to do is shove this into the top bottle, my cane, and then get my tubing down into that bottle at about the same time, so hopefully it'll all work. So here in a few minutes that'll be done transferring. I'll stick an airlock on here and we'll sit it in a nice quiet place for another month. And then it'll be time to bottle. Got it all racked, transferred, siphoned, whatever you want to call it. You can see the sediment that was left behind. The color of the wine's been very good this year. The aroma, flavor is very intense. Can't wait to bottle this in a month. It's August now, and it's finally time to bottle this strawberry wine. I start out by mixing up some sulfite solution, 1 sulfite tablet per gallon, and I use that to sanitize my bottling bucket and my racking cane and tubing and bottle filler and my stirrer. See, I've got a few bottles soaking in here. I've got some already drained out and ready to be filled. And up here I've got my 5 gallons of strawberry wine. Since I'm sweetening this batch, I've dissolved sugar in water. 5 cups of sugar and 2.5 cups of water, heated in the microwave. Stirred it till it was all dissolved and allowed it to cool. Since I am sweetening the wine, I'm going to have to add sorbates, 2.5 teaspoons. And I'm also going to crush 5 sulfite tablets. Now if this was a 12% wine, you could probably use 3 cups of sugar. The right way to sweeten your wine is to taste it, add a little bit at a time and keep tasting it. I've made this enough times that I know that 5 cups in a 15% alcohol strawberry wine is about what I want. So I'm going to pour that into my bottling bucket along with some sorbates and my sulfites. Now if you wanted to make a totally dry strawberry wine, you wouldn't add sugar and you wouldn't need sorbates, but you'd still add sulfites. So I'm going to get my racking cane fired up here and see if I can get this wine where it needs to be. Now I have my sugar and my sorbates in my bottling bucket, and I'm going to add my crushed sulfite tablets. I like to put them in first so they'll mix in good once I start running the wine in there. Strawberry wine is siphoning into the bottling bucket, going at a pretty good pace. Now when this gets close to the bottom, I'll have to tilt my carboy a little bit to make sure I get all of it out. The bottling bucket is full of finished wine, ready to be bottled. I have my bottle filler here. It has a little valve on the bottom. When you push against it on the bottom of the bottle, it opens up. And then you lift up, the weight of the liquid holds it shut. Got it hooked on my spigot down here on my bucket. I've got my bottles lined up and all ready. So I'm going to start filling these. Here's one bottle being filled. Push down, it opens up. And you want to fill the bottle as full as you can. When you pull this bottling wand out, it'll leave enough airspace at the top. A little bit over. That's about all I can get in one. I ended up with 26/5 plus a little extra for a few samples. The corks are over here floating in some sulfite solution. I'm going to use this double-handled corker and cork these bottles. Corking these bottles is relatively easy. Just stick a cork in my corker, put it on top, it grips the bottle. There you are. There's 26 bottles corked. All I have left to do now is print labels, which I usually print on removable labels, and then store these for a couple months. They'll continue to age up to 1 year and improve, or you can drink it sooner than that. The wine bottles are all labeled now. They need to be stored on their side so the cork stays wet for at least a month. They'll be pretty good after 2 months. They'll be very good at 1 year. The finished strawberry wine is about a year old now. I need to finish up my video, so I'm going to sample a bottle and have a few more things to add. First thing I wanted to mention is the amount of sulfites I use. My sanitize my bottles. A lot of sources say to use higher amounts of sulfites, but I use the same amount as what you'd put in your must. I keep my bottles really clean, my fermenters clean, wash them in hot water, dry them out in the sun, and I haven't had any trouble using that amount of sulfites to sanitize with. The other thing I want to mention is crushing fruit. I use a wine bottle to gently crush my fruit. That's a real old school method of doing it. The only problem is that bottles are made of glass and they could possibly break. So it might be safer to use a food processor or a blender. You just want to cut the fruit up into small pieces. You don't really want to liquefy it. Another thing I wanted to mention was my fermenters. My first racking I used a glass carboy. The second racking I used a plastic water bottle. A friend of mine started using these recently and I thought I'd try it, and I've had good results with them. There's always some kind of question about plastics and what works best and what doesn't. The water bottles work fine for me because they're really good quality plastic. They don't allow odors in or out. I mean, if you think about it, when you ship water, you don't want it to pick up anything. But there are fermenters made specifically out of plastic just for wine and beer. And there are also glass and stainless fermenters. Probably glass and stainless are the best. I usually start with a plastic bucket for my primary fermenter. I have two glass carboys, but sometimes one of them has wine in it. So this time I used a glass carboy and I used a plastic 5-gallon water jug. And then I racked into my bucket before I bottled. Which brings up my last point, I believe. When you sweeten your wine, you want to use 2 parts sugar, 1 part water. Heat it till it's completely dissolved. The ideal way is to start out with maybe a cup at a time and mix it in, taste it, and just gradually add your sugar till you get it sweetened just the way you want it. The problem with that is that you end up tasting it a lot of times, and it takes a long time, and you still have to fill your bottles by the time they're done. So experiment the first time you make a batch. But after that, you should have some kind of idea of about how much sugar to start with. Well, this is about a year old, as I said. It tastes like the strawberries were just picked yesterday. Oh, that's good. And that is a good reason to make your own strawberry wine. Cheers!